honored to stand here today with dedicated colleagues from within the Department of Justice as well as beyond it to announce a historic settlement with Pfizer Incorporated. In a combination civil and criminal settlement, Pfizer has agreed to pay $2.3 billion, the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the Department of Justice.
What it says is that they have made a decision that money in their pockets is more important than public health.
FDA has issued an alert to health professionals on emerging safety concerns about the antibiotic Zyvox. The study showed that patients on Zyvox had a higher chance of death than with any of the other drugs.
In the case of Zyvox, which is a very heavy-duty antibiotic, they were given a warning letter, which is the most serious thing the FDA can do. They ignored that. This is true of all these drugs that are involved in this settlement, whether it be Geodon, which is an antipsychotic, which was illegally marketed, criminally marketed, Zyvox, Lyrica, and Bextra. So that means the consumer, with our healthcare costs, and this is one of the major reasons our healthcare costs have gone skyrocketing. And this is the government really coming down hard for one of the first times. They also came down hard in the case we handled involving Zyprexa on January 31st of this year, where Eli Lilly had to pay a criminal penalty of $1.4 billion. Now, that was the biggest single drug payment of a fine in history of the government. Biggest, and we're involved in that this year too. From our firm's standpoint, this is the kind of work that lawyers should be doing. As of this date, our firm for the United States has been involved in the recovery of $3.7 billion in 9 months. Now what I want to do, if it continues, I want to see to it that the CEO of these major companies, if they do it again, this time, they will be behind bars.
Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in Inside the Pharmaceutical Industry, Deceptive Marketing Schemes, to examine how Steve Scheller, founding partner of Scheller PC, and Brian McCormick Jr., managing partner of the firm, have successfully exposed the pharmaceutical industry by representing industry insiders, whistleblowers, and recovering a record of over $4.2 billion for the U.S. government. $520 million against AstraZeneca in April 2010, $2.3 billion against Pfizer in September 2009, and $1.4 billion against Eli Lilly and Company in January 2009. And the Scheller law firm has been the only firm in America involved in all three of these extraordinary settlements. Steve's firm protected the identities of these whistleblowers, prepared their cases so that they were the first to file, which earned them large financial rewards for all the risks they took, all due to Steve's hard work and dedication. Steve has been in the forefront in the fight against Big Pharma, pushing antidepressants and antipsychotics on the public since the days of Prozac. In this Insider Exclusive special, we will reveal how the pharmaceutical industry, a $650+ billion year industry, has been the most profitable business in the U.S., treating disease as an industry accounting for nearly 30% of the U.S. gross domestic product. A core attribute to Big Pharma's overwhelming success lies in the liaison between the companies and the systems management healthcare industry. The medical establishment works closely with the drug multinationals whose main objective is profits and whose worst nightmare would be an epidemic of good health. Lots of drugs must be sold. In order to achieve this, anything goes: lies, fraud, and kickbacks. And doctors are the principal salespeople of the drug companies. They are rewarded with research grants, gifts, and lavish perks. Few Americans realize that the pharmaceutical industry has the worst record of illegal violations of the law than in any other industry. Many people don't realize how drug companies are accused today of endangering public health through wide-scale fraudulent marketing schemes, ranging from covertly attempting to persuade consumers that they are ill, to bribing doctors and misrepresenting the results of safety tests on their products. In this investigative special, we will examine how the drug industry continues to get away with deceptive off-label marketing and how the American Medical Association and the Federal Drug Administration are in many ways complicit in allowing doctors to continue to prescribe drugs for off-label purposes. Because of this broken system, drug companies get away with deceptive pharmaceutical marketing for so many years, pocketing billions of dollars of profits and then paying only a small percentage of those billions in fines and settlements. Steve and Brian will share why you need to be aware of the medical pharmaceutical complex and how the pharmaceutical industry has strayed from their original mission of discovering and manufacturing useful drugs and instead become vast marketing machines with unprecedented control over their own fortunes, with nearly limitless influence over medical research, education, and how doctors do their jobs. Steve and Brian expose the shocking truth of what the pharmaceutical industry has become and argues for essential, long overdue changes. Only in America, if you are a pharmaceutical executive or a lobbyist representing a drug company who has collected a litany of charges including medical fraud, criminal salesmanship, gaming the insurance industry, repeated lying to federal officials, and manipulation of data regarding life-threatening adverse effects of drugs that have killed so many people, can you get away with a fine, a surge in the stock market after a settlement, a financial bonus, and the personal satisfaction in not having to apologize so you can continue business as usual. This is the power that the pharmaceutical industrial complex possesses, and its usurped right to disdain every noble principle in the Hippocratic oath that every physician dedicates her or himself to live by, that I will exercise my art solely for the cure of my patients and will give no drug and perform no operation for a criminal purpose. Steve's life and career is dedicated to changing the status quo. And because of that success and dedication, he has been continually asked to help some of America's most powerful people in making a positive difference, from Secretary Hillary Clinton and former President Bill Clinton to the 45th governor of his own home state, Pennsylvania, Governor Ed Rendell.
I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Steve for what he does in the public sector. Of course, first and foremost, he's a great lawyer, he's a great family person, he runs a terrific business, all of those things. But Steve loves politics, loves government, understands that with all its warts, it's the only way to get things done, to make real change happen in this country. But he just doesn't pontificate, he just doesn't sound off about what needs to be done. He puts his money where his mouth is, and he puts his energy and his work product where his mouth is.
Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It is my great pleasure to introduce Steve Scheller and Brian McCormick to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you, Steve.
Right, thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What type of law do you generally practice?
We do mostly mass tort and pharmaceutical law. We do a lot of whistleblower law, and that's where our sweet spot is right now in 2012.
And that's primarily in the healthcare industry, right, Steve?
Yeah, primarily healthcare, although we're starting to look into other areas because of the expanded statutes for whistleblowers.
Yeah, for our audience who really may not understand what a whistleblower lawsuit is, what is that exactly?
A whistleblower lawsuit is somebody who has inside information that is not publicly disclosed.
And oftentimes they work for companies.
Usually they work for the company involved, and they come forward and file under seal. When I mean under seal, it's not publicly disclosed for a long time, a case against their company.
Now, oftentimes these people are not lawyers. They're common everyday workers.
Yeah,
so when you say come forwards, because there are a lot of people who are watching this show and they may have inside information, they'd like to know how to do this. Do they come to a law firm like your own?
Yeah, they need to come to a law firm like us because it's a very highly specialized area.
Yeah.
You really have to know what you're doing.
And you prepare a case, a filing, which is filed under seal.
In federal court.
Yeah.
can be filed under certain in-state courts too, under state court statutes, because 29 states now also have whistleblower statutes. The whistleblower then recovers a significant portion of what they recover for the government or the state government, usually anywhere from 15 to 25% of the recovery. These statutes were implemented originally after the Civil War for the purpose of recovering money that was wasted and stolen from the government in that war. And then they were amended again in 1986 and expanded, and hadn't been used much, frankly, until we started to use them back in early 2000. It became a very interesting issue how this all occurred, because what happened was I was actually working on the Bush versus Gore case. And what happened was my mother-in-law called me on Election Day 2000. She was apoplectic. She lived in Boca Raton, Florida. And she was convinced she voted by mistake for Buchanan because they had the butterfly ballot there. We filed a lawsuit and got the initial injunction, actually, against the Harris certifying the Florida election, and that's what kicked off that litigation. During that litigation, one of the lawyers I had helping me on the case got a phone call from a woman in Florida whose son got Prozac extended release in the mail. Somehow or other, Eli Lilly detail reps were going into doctors' offices and getting the names of patients who had been on SSRIs, that's these kinds of pills like Prozac. And they were losing their patent on Prozac, so they were coming out with a Prozac extended release pill so they could make more money. They would then send it out in the mail. How they managed to do it, I don't understand, and got away with it. And the woman was very upset because her 16-year-old son had gotten this in the mail. She called us. That ended up with us filing a class action against Eli Lilly for doing this, which we settled. But in the interim, I was on national television, and I got calls from California from 6 whistleblowers. They were detail reps, some of them were pharmacists, all employees of Eli Lilly, telling me they were doing the same thing in California and in Oregon. I went out there, we looked into it, and they started telling me the story about Zyprexa, which I didn't know even what it was at the time. It's an antipsychotic, it's a very heavy-duty drug. But I did know something about whistleblower law. At that time, very few cases had ever been filed, because this is, 2000 now, 2001.
Right.
We filed the Lilly case under seal in 2002. That was one of the earliest major pharmaceutical whistleblower cases. And at the time we finally resolved it, it was the largest whistleblower settlement in history.
Now let's talk about the specific fraud, because Zyprexa, to give you an example, which I think there was a settlement of what, $1.4 billion?
Yeah, $1.420 billion.
Yeah. Zyprexa originally, and a lot of people need to know this, so Zyprexa was originally approved by the FDA under very specific purposes. Those purposes were what?
For basically schizophrenia.
Yeah.
You had to be very seriously mentally ill, and it did work.
Yeah. Now, where the fraud came in was this other area that I want to talk about, and our audience needs to know about this, which is off-label marketing, right?
Right.
Where the drug companies realize, and this is still ongoing today, the drug companies realize we can make a lot more money with this drug if we do what?
If they can get it used for many different things.
And how do they do that?
They do it directly by having their detail reps go into the doctor's offices and tell the doctors that this drug is said to work for many different things, or they use ghostwriters to publish literature.
Okay, now let's back up here a little bit. They're detail reps. You're talking about their sales reps.
They're sales reps.
That come into the medical offices, and I understand that the pharmaceutical companies are not allowed to give them any kind of printed material that says that it can be used for this or these other kind of purposes, but they can provide them studies, right?
Right.
That are done in Ethiopia, that are done on the moon, right?
Well, we've
where
seen
they've
them
had these
done in
wonderful
Indonesia.
had these wonderful results.
Eastern Europe is a very popular
Now,
place.
doctors, when you go to medical school, you're not stupid. You graduate medical school, they know that, this might be, especially with the news and all the health fraud cases today, that maybe this might be suspect. So my question to you, because this is the problem I see in this whole chain of events, why do the doctors prescribe the medicines for off-label purposes?
Mainly money.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a minute. How does a doctor make money when he prescribes more of Zyprexa than originally just for schizophrenia patients?
Well, he makes money by getting asked to do speaking engagements for the drug company.
Yeah.
They would use them for so-called clinical trials, advisors to the drug companies.
The companies can't pay the doctors directly. So the easier way for them to do it is to say, doctor, we saw that your prescriptions are much higher this month than they were last month.
Yeah.
We have a convention in Puerto Rico where we're going to be introducing a new drug. We'd love you to come speak.
Yeah.
Or we have a convention in 6 months in Hawaii. We've been thinking about bringing you.
Yeah.
If you can talk to people about how well this drug is doing with your patients, we'd love to pay for you and your wife and your 3 kids to come to Hawaii.
Do they also pay them speaking fees?
Yes, they pay them
Some
on top of
doctors
that.
make hundreds of thousands of dollars in
Speaking fees. Okay. And by the way, this is never disclosed to anybody, is it?
And
Well, it is now,
Yeah.
nowadays, because of cases like ours, the federal government, some of the state governments have implemented a policy where you can now see if your doctor is being paid by what company and how much and where they're going. But that only began very recently. Until that, you had no idea. And even now, some of those numbers, the grants that you guys discussed, they're still not reported. It's just direct payments for speaking fees.
Yeah. I have one of the ways to close, and I call this a loophole, right? The doctors are responsible for the off-label marketing successes, aren't they? Because doctors can prescribe any type of drug, whatever they want. They're MDs, right? Whatever. Now, one of the ways I see in closing this loophole is suing the doctors.
yeah, and that's become very difficult these days because what they call tort reform, and I call it tort deform.
Yeah, but if a doctor is prescribing a medicine that is not authorized by the FDA for that use.
But that is not malpractice. Doctors are permitted to do that. They do it under the guise of taking the position. And let's look at it this way: if you have cancer and you need, they use drugs off-label and I don't object to that under certain circumstances. The problem is this off-label use has become expansive to almost everything they can do. And you can't sue a doctor for prescribing off-label medical malpractice. You can't.
That's wrong.
It's absolutely wrong, but you can't do it. Now, some states have informed consent requirements for drugs where they are supposed to tell you that, that they are prescribing it off-label.
Do they tell patients that?
Usually not.
Okay, we see one of the reasons we do this shows is we try to find these little loopholes. You see, if we close that loophole, what if they notify the patient? They're required to do that at least. They should
Well,
be.
they should be required to do that. They're not required in most instances.
I'm giving you a drug that hasn't been approved by the FDA because
but
I kind of think
it's
it works.
great, and I think it'll work.
Yeah, I mean, there's no studies, there's no proof, there's no way for them to show that a drug that may be treating an ear infection somehow gets rid of a ingrown toenail. But they feel like they can, if they have they heard talk at the golf club or they heard talk at a seminar, they can use that for that purpose, but they're not required to tell the people and their patients that the drug that is only approved by the FDA for an earache can be used for anything else, and they're using it for something
And this
different.
is big business. You'll find with most antipsychotics, this is the area that is particularly the worst.
Why?
And the reason it's the worst, there are very few and almost no objective standards for diagnosing somebody with psychosis or, I'm depressed, I'm aggravated, I had a fight with
You can't really see how things get better.
You can't get a blood work.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And what happens is this is a wonderful opportunity for the drug companies to in my view, steal money from the taxpayers, because we're paying for a lot of these drugs in Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes.
In fact, my thinking is the best way to put an end to some of the terrible payments cost of Medicare and Medicaid and reduce it probably 10 or 20% expenses wise nationally, is to put a stop to off-label prescribing of these drugs. Absolutely. And when you have a situation where you cannot have a blood test or a test to determine whether or not you really have a problem, like post-traumatic stress disorder, our veterans are coming back from the war. They're being fed these pills like sugar-coated candy. It's a disgrace. They're basically heavy-duty sleep tablets, have terrible, terrible adverse event profiles. They cause people to commit suicide. They cause tardive dyskinesia, in a very Parkinson-type syndrome, shaky syndromes. And then you have to, the taxpayer ends up paying to treat them for that.
Well, most importantly, your work and the work that companies like yourself are doing in reining in some of the costs by alerting the federal government and state governments that these costs are rampant by deceptive sales practices by these pharmaceutical companies really doing well. And that's why we have done this show. And we want anybody and everybody out there in the public who knows of any kind of inside information to be able to contact you, because you guys are the experts in this. And I want to thank you very much for being on the program. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.